Kel'Thuzad was a name whispered in fear across the stars. Her shadow stretched over entire galaxies, her name enough to send mighty civilizations into silence. As the supreme warlord of the Tyrethian Empire, she had conquered more worlds than even the ancient records dared to count. No one questioned her authority. To challenge her meant destruction. She was terrifying to behold. Standing twice the height of most humanoid species, her form was both graceful and monstrous. Her deep violet skin shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and her golden eyes pierced through the bravest of hearts. Her voice carried an unnatural resonance, a force that made her enemies tremble even before her armies arrived. Her people, the Xyrathians, thrived on conquest. To them, expansion was not just survival but tradition. To rule was to prove one's strength, and Kel'Thuzad had proven herself countless times. Yet beneath the steel armor and the cold gaze, she carried a burden, a feeling she dared not name. Kel'Thuzad often stood alone in her chamber aboard her flagship, Dreadspire. It was the most advanced vessel in the Tyrethian fleet, a colossal weapon of destruction, equipped to erase entire planets if necessary. But tonight, it felt hollow. The stars beyond her viewport twinkled with indifference as she gazed out at them. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. General Vrax, one of her most trusted commanders, entered the chamber. He bowed low, his serpentine form coiling slightly in deference. "Supreme Warlord," he said, his voice low and deferential. "We have received reports from the outer systems. The humans have resisted again." Kel'Thuzad turned slowly, her golden eyes narrowing. "Humans, the ones from Sol. What resistance can such a fragile species offer?" Vrax hesitated, clearly uncomfortable delivering the news. "They've developed strategies, unconventional ones. They exploit our weaknesses in ways other species never attempted. They dare to think themselves clever," Kel'Thuzad interrupted, her voice a low growl. She stepped closer, her presence towering over the general. "Tell me, Vrax, what is the name of their leader?" "Commander Elias Vance," Vrax replied. "He has rallied their forces and evaded capture multiple times. His tactics have caused minor setbacks. Some within the council are beginning to question." Kel'Thuzad raised a hand, silencing him. "The council is irrelevant. I will deal with these humans personally. Prepare the fleet." Vrax bowed again and left, leaving Kel'Thuzad alone with her thoughts. Humans, she had dismissed them as insignificant, too weak, too divided to pose any real threat. Yet this Vance had managed to disrupt her plans. As the Dreadspire moved toward the human stronghold, Kel'Thuzad reviewed what little intelligence they had gathered. Humans were physically unimpressive by Xyrathian standards, their technology primitive compared to her empires. And yet there was something about them. Something in the way they fought, in the way they refused to submit. The fleet arrived at Earth's outer defenses within hours. The planet hung like a jewel in the void, its blue and green surface deceptively peaceful. Kel'Thuzad issued her command swiftly, her fleet forming an unbreakable blockade around the planet. "Open a channel," she ordered. The screen before her flickered to life, revealing a human man standing in a dimly lit command center. He was unremarkable at first glance, with a sturdy frame and piercing blue eyes. Yet there was something in his expression, a calm defiance that intrigued her. "This is Commander Elias Vance," the man said, his voice steady. "I assume I'm speaking to the infamous Kel'Thuzad." She leaned forward, her golden eyes locking onto his image. "You are bold, human, to address me without fear. Do you not understand what stands before you?" "I understand perfectly," Vance replied. "You're here to crush us, but we won't bow. Not to you, not to anyone." Kel'Thuzad tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You amuse me, Commander. Do you truly believe your people can stand against the might of the Xyrathian Empire?" Vance's gaze didn't waver. "Maybe not forever, but we'll make sure you remember us. We'll make sure you think twice before underestimating humanity again." For a moment, Caltherath said nothing. Then she laughed, a low, resonant sound that filled the chamber. "Very well, Commander Vance. Let us see how long your defiance lasts." The transmission ended, and Caltherath turned to her crew. "Launch the assault," she commanded, "but leave their leader alive. I want to see the man who dares challenge me." As the fleet descended on Earth, Caltherath felt a strange anticipation. This was no ordinary conquest. The humans had sparked something within her, something she hadn't felt in centuries. The game had begun. The day the Tyrathian fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, the world held its breath. The humans knew their survival was in question, but they also knew something else. There was one thing that could not be taken from them, no matter how powerful the enemy: their will. Commander Elias Vance stood in the command center of Earth's Central Defense Station. His dark brown hair was messy from hours of strategizing, but his sharp blue eyes remained focused. Around him, his officers and soldiers moved with a quiet determination, as if the arrival of Caltherath's fleet was just another challenge to face. "They've begun their descent," Lieutenant Ramirez reported, her voice steady, though her knuckles were white from gripping the console. Vance nodded. "Prepare the defense grid. I want all human ships in position. We don't have the luxury of underestimating them." Ramirez gave him a questioning look. "Are you sure this is the right move, Commander? We can't win this. Not without help." Vance turned toward her, his expression calm. "We might not win, but we will make them earn it. Let them see what happens when you push humanity to the edge." As the humans scrambled to launch their counterattack, Caltherath watched from her command ship. She stood in front of the vast view of Earth, her expression unreadable as she observed the human efforts. The planet's defenders were weak. She could see it clearly. The ships were small, outdated compared to the might of her fleet, and yet there was something in their approach that intrigued her. They were fighting not to win, but to survive. Every ship launched, every missile fired, every command given, spoke of a people who refused to back down. The more Caltherath studied them, the more impressed she became. It wasn't the technology that made the humans dangerous. It was their spirit. A comms officer approached her with a report. "Supreme Warlord, Commander Vance has sent a direct message to you." Caltherath turned her golden eyes toward the officer, raising an eyebrow. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and Vance's face appeared again. His calm demeanor was unbroken, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "I'm sure you've noticed by now, Caltherath, that we're not like the others you've conquered," Vance said. "We may be small, but we're not so easily defeated. You might be the most powerful creature in the galaxy, but there's one thing you don't have." "And what is that?" Caltherath's voice was like a low growl, but there was a trace of curiosity beneath it. "Us, humans," Vance replied simply. "We don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because we have to." Caltherath's eyes narrowed as she listened to him. She had never encountered a creature so resolute. Most species, when faced with her power, broke quickly, begging for mercy or surrendering without a fight. But not these humans. They fought as if every moment of their existence was a battle. "Tell me, Commander," Caltherath said, her voice growing colder. "Do you believe you can win?" Vance's lips curled into a small smile. "I believe we can make you regret underestimating us." The transmission ended, and Caltherath stood in silence for a moment. She had expected fear, panic, maybe even desperation. Instead, Vance had given her a glimpse of something far more unsettling: confidence. The fleet continued its assault on Earth, but Caltherath's mind was not fully focused on the attack anymore. She found herself thinking about Vance, about his words, his calm in the face of certain defeat. It was a kind of power she hadn't seen before. It was not the power of strength or dominance, but the power of determination. On the ground, humans were preparing for the worst. The larger cities were evacuated, and the military made their final stand, setting up defensive barriers and launching missiles at the descending Tyrathian ships. It was a desperate attempt to slow the enemy, but they knew it was unlikely to change the outcome. But even in this chaos, something extraordinary began to happen. Vance had been right. The human spirit was their greatest weapon. The people of Earth, united by the threat of annihilation, fought like never before. In every corner of the planet, there were stories of courage, of families coming together, of soldiers charging into battle with nothing but their will to protect what they loved. Even when they knew they couldn't win, they fought with everything they had. Kel-Tharath watched the human resistance with increasing fascination. She had seen countless worlds fall under her rule. But this was different. She had underestimated them. Not because of their technology or power, but because she had never considered the strength of their hearts. The battle raged for days, with both sides taking heavy losses. Kel-Tharath's fleet had destroyed entire cities, but humanity was not giving up. Every time it seemed like defeat was near, new forces would emerge from the shadows to fight. Finally, as Kel-Tharath watched the last human stronghold hold out against her forces, she made a decision. She called for another communication with Vance. The screen blinked to life, and Vance's familiar face appeared. He was tired, but his eyes still burned with that same unwavering resolve. "You wanted to speak with me, Warlord?" he asked, his voice steady. Kel-Tharath regarded him for a moment, her golden eyes thoughtful. "Commander Vance, you are unlike anyone I have ever encountered. Your people, they are not as weak as I once believed." Vance raised an eyebrow. "What are you saying?" Kel-Tharath stepped closer to the screen. "I am offering you a truce." The truce offer shocked Commander Elias Vance, but it was also the answer he had secretly hoped for. After weeks of fighting, with Earth hanging on by a thread, this was the chance they needed, a chance to stop the slaughter. Still, he knew there had to be a catch. Nothing came for free, especially not from Kel-Tharath. He stood in the command center, staring at the screen where Kel-Tharath's image flickered with cold authority. Her golden eyes, which once radiated only arrogance, now seemed to hold something else, something deeper, less certain. Vance wasn't sure what had changed, but he felt it. "I'm listening," Vance said, his voice calm, though his mind raced. Kel-Tharath's lips barely moved, but her voice was sharp and clear. "You and your people are resilient. I admire that. You are not like the others who have fallen before me." She paused, as though weighing her next words carefully. "I offer you peace, Commander. Cease your attacks, and your people will be spared. We will establish a new order, one in which your planet is left alone, free to govern itself." Vance studied her, his fingers tightening around the edge of his console. Peace. From her, it was almost too good to be true. He had to be careful. "And what do you get out of this?" he asked, not hiding his suspicion. Kel-Tharath tilted her head, as if she was considering how best to explain herself. "My people, we are old. Our empire is vast, but it is tired. We conquer because it is all we have known for centuries. But I believe there is another way. I've seen something in you humans that I have not seen in my own people. A purpose beyond mere survival." Vance was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Was this some kind of trick? She had destroyed entire cities, torn through his people like a storm, and yet he was offering peace. Was it genuine, or was she simply tired of the fight? "I don't trust you," Vance said bluntly. "You've hurt us. You've killed us. What's to say you won't turn on us again once we let our guard down?" Kel-Tharath's gaze hardened. "I don't expect you to trust me, human. I expect you to think, to see the truth in what I am offering. I am not asking for your surrender. I am offering an opportunity to start fresh." Vance knew the decision wasn't his alone. He had to consult with his team, with the leaders of Earth. But in that moment, something inside him stirred, something that told him that perhaps, just perhaps, this was the chance for something better. "I'll take this to the council," he said, "but don't mistake my words for an agreement. We'll consider your offer, but we'll keep fighting until we are certain that peace is what you truly want." The transmission ended, leaving Vance alone with his thoughts. The room around him buzzed with activity as his officers continued to monitor the status of Earth's defenses. Yet Vance felt a strange weight on his shoulders. Was Cal Thereth really seeking peace? Or was this just another manipulation, another way to break humanity's spirit? Back on the Dreadspire, Cal Thereth stood before the massive viewport, staring out into the depths of space. Her fleet had taken more than enough from Earth, but something about this moment felt different. The humans, particularly Commander Vance, had struck a chord within her. She had conquered countless civilizations. Some had fought, some had surrendered. But the humans were different. They fought not just for survival, but for something more. They fought for hope, for a future. In all her years, Cal Thereth had never encountered a species that valued life in such a way. Her own people had been raised on conquest, on domination. But Vance's words had lingered in her mind. She turned to her second-in-command, General Vrax, who stood silently at her side. "Do you believe they will accept the truce?" Vrax hesitated before answering. "I am not certain. Humans are unpredictable, Supreme Warlord. They fight with passion, but they also seem to fight with something more. You felt it too, didn't you? The fire in their hearts." Cal Thereth didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to a small console and stared at the battle reports from the past few days. Her forces had suffered more casualties than expected, and her fleet's morale was beginning to waver. Her own warriors had begun to question the endless conquests that had defined their existence. Were they really so different from the humans they despised? She thought back to the way Vance had spoken to her. So calm, so certain, despite the overwhelming odds. Humans did not accept defeat easily. They didn't just obey. They'd fought. For the first time in her life, Cal Thereth wondered if there was more to power than strength and fear. "General, prepare the fleet for withdrawal," Cal Thereth ordered suddenly. Vrax's eyes widened in disbelief. "Withdraw? But we've barely begun to break their defenses." "I said prepare to withdraw," Cal Thereth repeated. "We will not conquer Earth, not today. I need time to understand these humans, and their leader." Vrax stared at her, his face a mask of confusion, but he nodded. "As you wish, Supreme Warlord." As Cal Thereth turned away from him, she couldn't shake the feeling that the decision to offer peace might just be the hardest choice she had ever made. She wasn't just questioning her strategy. She was questioning everything she had known about strength, power, and what it meant to rule. She couldn't explain it, but she felt a strange sense of anticipation. Perhaps this was the moment when everything could change. The decision to withdraw was not an easy one for Cal Thereth. Her fleet had come so close to victory. And yet, for the first time in years, she found herself questioning the purpose of it all. Was it enough to simply conquer? Was it enough to impose her will on the universe and demand submission from all who crossed her path? As the Dreadspire moved back into the vastness of space, she stood silently in her command chamber, watching the stars drift by. There was no celebration, no triumph in the retreat. She was not used to failure, nor to the uncertainty she now felt. "Supreme Warlord," General Vrax's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We have received a transmission from Commander Vance." Cal Thereth didn't respond immediately. She wasn't sure what to expect from the human now. Was he mocking her? Or was this truly a moment of negotiation? Finally, she turned to face the screen. Vance appeared again, his calm demeanor unchanged, even after the fleet had pulled back. "I must admit, I wasn't expecting this turn of events," he said, his voice steady. "You could have destroyed us, and yet you choose to leave." Cal Thereth's golden eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of her chamber. "I did not come to destroy you, Commander. I came to test your resolve, to see what you truly are." She paused for a moment, as if weighing her next words carefully. "I see now that I underestimated you." Vance raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. "Your people are different," Cal Thereth continued. "There is something in you, something that defies logic. You fight not just for survival, but for something greater. That is something I did not expect. Vance's expression softened, though his eyes remained wary. It's not about just surviving, Warlord. It's about what comes after survival. It's about hope and freedom. We fight for a future where we're not ruled by fear. Kel-Therath studied him, sensing the truth in his words. She had lived her entire existence in the shadow of conquest, building an empire through strength and fear. She had always believed that the only way to ensure peace was through dominance. But here was a human, standing firm against all odds, talking about hope instead of power. For the first time, Kel-Therath felt a flicker of doubt. Was there another way? Was peace really possible, or was it just an illusion that would crumble under the weight of time and conflict? I have offered you peace, Commander, Kel-Therath said, her voice carefully controlled. But it is up to you to decide what happens next. I will not force your people into submission. I will not destroy Earth, not if you can prove that you can stand beside me, not against me. Vance didn't answer right away, his mind racing. Could he trust her? Could humanity trust her? His people had suffered so much already, and Kel-Therath's reputation preceded her. She was the conqueror of worlds, the harbinger of destruction. Yet there was a part of him that believed her offer was genuine. She had seen something in humanity, something that made her question her way of life. He sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the decision. We'll need time to talk, time to discuss the future of Earth. Kel-Therath gave a single nod. I will give you that time, Commander. But understand this, I will not wait forever. The transmission ended, and Vance was left staring at the blank screen in front of him. He had known the moment would come. He had known that at some point, Kel-Therath would offer a way out. But now that it was here, he wasn't sure how to move forward. He turned to his officers, who had been listening quietly from the control room. We need to call a meeting. We need to decide whether we believe her or not. Lieutenant Ramirez stepped forward, her face tense. Do you think we can trust her, sir? Vance paused, considering the question. I don't know, but we have to consider the possibility that this could be our chance to end the war without more bloodshed. And if she's lying? Ramirez asked. Vance's eyes hardened. Then we'll be ready to fight. But we have to try, Lieutenant. We have to try for peace. Meanwhile, aboard the Dreadspire, Kel-Therath turned away from the communications console and stared out at the swirling nebula that surrounded her fleet. She had expected a quick victory, an easy conquest, but instead, she had found herself facing a challenge she hadn't anticipated: the human spirit. She had seen the destruction she had caused, the suffering, and yet there was something in the way humans resisted that sparked something inside her. They didn't fight because they had to. They fought because they believed in something. She wasn't used to feeling like this. It was a strange, foreign sensation. Was it hope? Or was it simply the recognition that humanity could be the one force in the universe that was not easily broken? Kel-Therath had spent her entire life seeking control, but now, for the first time, she was unsure whether control was what she truly wanted. Her thoughts were interrupted when General Vrax entered the chamber again. Supreme Warlord, there is movement among the human leadership. They are preparing for a summit. It seems they are considering your offer. Kel-Therath nodded slowly. We shall see what they decide. But know this, General. Whatever happens, we will not leave here unchanged. The meeting on Earth was set, and the fate of the planet hung in the balance. For the first time in history, a confrontation between two powerful species could lead to something other than destruction. The question was, would humanity choose war, or would they seize the opportunity for peace? The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Kel-Therath didn't feel so sure of her victory. The summit was set to take place on neutral ground, an abandoned military base, located far from any of the human capitals, a place where no one could claim ownership. Both sides would meet there, Commander Elias Vance representing Earth, and Kel-Therath as the emissary of the Tyrathian Empire. For days, the humans prepared. Vance knew this meeting could decide the future of his people, but it also carried a heavy risk. He had to be careful with every word, every move. Trust was still fragile, and Calthereth, despite her offer of peace, was not someone he could afford to underestimate. As the day of the summit approached, Vance stood at the window of his quarters, watching the sky. It was early morning, and a slight chill hung in the air. The world felt quieter than usual, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The peaceful silence felt unsettling. "Sir, the convoy is ready," Lieutenant Ramirez said, stepping into the room. "We're set to leave for the summit." Vance turned, nodding. "Let's go then. We don't have time to waste." Meanwhile, aboard the Dreadspire, Calthereth prepared for her own journey to the summit. She stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her dark cloak. There was no need for armor here. This meeting was not about power. It was about something more delicate. She had not expected to feel this conflicted. Her warriors had fought hard to weaken Earth, and they were eager for the final strike. But Calthereth's mind was elsewhere. The offer of peace still lingered, and despite her earlier confidence, she wondered if it was the right path. What if the humans truly rejected her offer? What if they fought on, refusing the chance for peace? As the ship made its descent to the summit location, Calthereth's thoughts continued to race. She had built an empire on fear and domination. But the humans, they were not like the others. They fought for hope, for something bigger than themselves. What would it be like to rule a world like that? To be part of something more than just endless conquest. The summit location was an eerie sight, the crumbling remains of a military outpost. Years of abandonment had left it overgrown with wild plants, but the area had been cleared in preparation for the meeting. Vance's convoy arrived first, with several armored vehicles parked in a large circle, ensuring that no one could approach without being noticed. Soldiers were posted on high alert, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of trouble. Vance stepped out of his vehicle, his face grim. He adjusted his uniform and walked towards the center of the gathering area, where he was greeted by a small group of advisors and military leaders. As he glanced around, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Whether for better or worse, he wasn't sure. The sound of engines broke the silence, and the Dreadspire appeared overhead, its massive form casting a shadow over the summit. The Kaiserethian warship slowly descended, the air buzzing with the power it commanded. As it touched down, the hatch opened, and Calthereth stepped out, her presence commanding immediate attention. The humans stared at her, wide-eyed, as she walked toward the center of the circle. Despite her imposing figure, there was a calmness to her movements, almost as though she was not the one in control. Vance met her gaze, standing tall despite the weight of the moment. He had prepared himself for this, but seeing her in person was different from any briefing or report. The rumors, the stories, none of it truly prepared him for the reality of facing the Hierathian Supreme Warlord. "Commander Vance," Calthereth said, her voice deep and resonant. "I see that you have come, just as you said you would." Vance nodded. "I came as promised, but I still don't trust you, Warlord." Calthereth's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "I would expect nothing less. Trust must be earned, not given freely." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I offer you peace, and I ask only that you consider it. You and your people have shown me something that I did not expect, something that even my empire has forgotten." Vance didn't respond immediately, choosing instead to glance over at his advisors, who were standing in the background, watching the exchange with a mix of curiosity and caution. It was clear they all felt the same unease he did. Peace with Calthereth was an uncertain proposition, one that could easily turn to betrayal. "Why now?" Vance asked finally, his voice low. "After everything we've fought through, why offer peace now? What's changed?" Calthereth stepped closer, her golden eyes locked on his. "You humans have something I do not. You fight for a future, not just for survival, but for something greater. I have come to believe that there is more to strength than just domination. Vance's eyebrows furrowed slightly. This was not the answer he expected. You think you've learned something from us? Keltherath's gaze softened for a brief moment, a rare vulnerability showing. Yes, and I am willing to hear what you have to say. I will listen to you, Commander. Vance took a deep breath, his mind turning over the possibilities. This wasn't just a meeting about terms of surrender. It was a moment of reckoning, a chance for something more. I don't know if I can trust you, Vance said, but I know that we don't have a choice anymore. If we don't try for peace now, there won't be a future at all. Keltherath nodded, her expression unreadable. Then let us see if we can build that future together. The tension in the air seemed to lift, but only slightly. The summit had begun, and with it, the fragile beginnings of a new path. Whether it would lead to peace or war, only time would tell. The summit had begun, and Commander Vance couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. The air was thick with uncertainty, and though the humans had agreed to negotiate, no one could predict where this path would lead. Across from him stood Keltherath, her towering presence still unsettling, but there was a change in her eyes, something softer that Vance couldn't quite place. As the meeting commenced, both sides took their seats around a large, circular table in the middle of the abandoned military base. Vance was surrounded by his most trusted advisors, Lieutenant Ramirez, General McAllister, and a few others. They exchanged quiet glances, all wondering the same thing. Could this be real? Keltherath's officers stood behind her, silent and vigilant, but unlike the tense posture they had shown during the war, there was now a strange stillness to their demeanor. They were watching their leader, waiting for her to make the first move, just as Vance's officers waited for him. I will start, Keltherath said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Her eyes never left Vance as she spoke. You have seen what my empire is capable of. The power we wield is unmatched, yet I have come to question if this power is enough. I wish to learn what it means to build something lasting, something that grows rather than destroys. Vance listened carefully. Her words, so carefully chosen, were not what he expected. He had prepared for threats, for demands, for more of the same. But this felt different. You speak of something greater, Vance said cautiously. But can it really be that simple? You've built your empire on fear, on domination. Can you truly turn away from that? Keltherath's eyes flickered, but she didn't flinch. I have spent my entire life conquering, Commander. I have ruled worlds and crushed those who opposed me. But I have seen the cost of that life. My people are weary, and I am weary too. I no longer wish to rule through fear. A heavy silence filled the room as Vance processed her words. Could it be possible that she was telling the truth? Could someone as powerful as Keltherath really want to change? He had his doubts, but part of him knew that if there was even a chance to end the conflict, they had to take it. I can't speak for my people, Warlord, Vance said slowly, his voice firm. But I know this. We fight for a future where we aren't ruled by fear, where we choose our path, and where we don't have to live under the shadow of an empire. If you're willing to try something different, then maybe there's a chance. Keltherath's golden eyes studied him, and for a moment, Vance felt as if she could see straight through him. There was something almost vulnerable in her gaze, and he realized that, in a strange way, they were both searching for the same thing. Freedom. The future you speak of, Keltherath said thoughtfully. It sounds appealing. But how do I know your people will accept peace? How can I be certain that you will keep your word once we lay down our weapons? Vance's expression hardened. That's what this is about, isn't it? Trust. He sighed, his gaze shifting to his officers. The humans aren't perfect. We've made mistakes, many mistakes, but we don't hide from them. We face them. That's the difference. You've built your empire by crushing your enemies. But we, humans, don't just survive by strength. We survive by learning, by growing, by building alliances. Keltherath was quiet for a moment. The words she had heard from Vance felt strange to her, like a foreign language. But there was something compelling about them, something she had never experienced in her own empire. "Then perhaps it is time to learn from you, Commander," Keltherath said finally. "I will not force your people into submission, but I will ask for something in return. We can build an alliance, but it must be based on respect. Your people must promise not to turn away from us when we need them. And I must promise not to crush your resistance the moment you disagree with me." Vance considered her words. This was the first time Keltherath had spoken of equality, of a mutual relationship instead of dominance. It was tempting to believe her, to hope that peace could truly be possible, but there were still so many uncertainties. "I can't speak for all of humanity," Vance said, his voice steady, "but I can speak for those who are willing to fight for something better. If we can find common ground, we can build something new. But if you break this trust, if you betray us again, I won't hesitate to fight. I won't let humanity fall under the rule of another empire." Keltherath nodded, her expression solemn. "I understand. I would not expect anything less from you. This is a fragile agreement. It must be built on action, not just words. I am willing to begin this new path, if you are." For a long moment, neither spoke. The room was filled with the sound of distant winds outside, the only noise in the otherwise still base. It felt as though time itself had slowed, waiting for the next step. Finally, Vance stood, extending his hand toward Keltherath. It was a gesture of peace, but also of caution. The future of Earth, and the galaxy, could depend on this moment. "Let's try to build something better," Vance said. Keltherath regarded his hand for a brief moment before reaching out, her strong fingers brushing against his. Their handshake was not just a gesture. It was a symbol of hope, fragile and uncertain, but a chance for something greater. As the summit continued, the two sides began to lay the groundwork for a tentative peace. The humans and the Xarathians would work together, though neither could fully trust the other yet. But as the days passed, there was something different in the air. A chance, however small, to build a future where the cycle of violence could finally end. Would it last? Only time would tell. But for now, humanity and the Xarathians had agreed to try. And in that, there was hope. The days following the summit were tense. Commander Vance and Keltherath had agreed to begin the difficult work of building a new alliance between Earth and the Xarathian Empire. But while the agreement had been made, both sides knew that the true test would be in the actions that followed. Trust had to be earned, and neither was willing to take the other's word blindly. Vance returned to Earth after the summit, his mind heavy with the weight of the agreement. The decision he had made was a dangerous one, and he couldn't help but wonder if it would be the right one. Could humanity truly find peace with a force as powerful as the Xarathians? Could Keltherath change, or was this just another one of her schemes? As he sat in his office, surrounded by his advisors, Vance tried to focus on the task at hand. "We need to be cautious. This peace, this alliance, it's fragile," he said, his voice steady but with an edge of concern. "I don't trust easily, but I do believe in the possibility of a better future. If we fail to take this chance, we may never get another one." General McAllister, his most trusted military advisor, spoke up. "You're right, sir. But we can't let our guard down. Keltherath is powerful. If she decides to break the agreement, we need to be ready." Vance nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "I understand the risks, but what if she's sincere? What if this is our chance to build something new? We have to be ready for both possibilities, General. We can't let fear guide us." Ramirez, always the optimist, added, "If we approach this with caution, we might be able to convince her to follow through. We'll have to work with the Xarathians, not against them. It won't be easy, but I believe it's possible." Vance leaned back in his chair, looking out of the window. The night sky was clear, the stars distant and cold, but the world below seemed full of potential, of possibility. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. Back aboard the Dreadspire, Caltharath sat in her private chamber, her eyes fixed on the star map before her. The empire she had built seemed so distant now, almost like another life. What had once brought her pride, conquest, power, dominance, now seemed hollow. The words of Commander Vance echoed in her mind. "We fight for a future." Her officers watched her closely, but Caltharath's expression remained unreadable. She had made a promise at the summit, but keeping it would require more than just words. She would have to change, and for someone like her, that was no small feat. She had ruled for so long, but could she truly give up the power she had known all her life? "I've lived my life in the shadow of empire," she said aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "But perhaps it is time for something new." General Vrax entered the chamber, standing at attention. "Supreme Warlord, there is news from Earth. Commander Vance is preparing for the first diplomatic talks between our people. He seems committed to the alliance." Caltharath glanced up at Vrax, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Committed, or is he simply afraid? I wonder what would happen if I broke my promise now." Vrax hesitated. "If you did, Warlord, we would have war. Earth is not an easy enemy to defeat." "Then why does it feel like they are the ones who have already won?" Caltharath murmured. Vrax bowed. "My apologies, Supreme Warlord. I only wish to remind you of the strength of our empire." Caltharath waved her hand dismissively. "I know our strength, General, but strength alone will not win us this. The humans, they are different, and maybe, just maybe, that difference is what we need." The first diplomatic meeting between the two sides took place in a neutral space station, miles away from the front lines. It was a place where the fear of war could be forgotten, and the possibility of peace could be given a chance. Vance and Caltharath met once again, but this time there was no tension between them. "Commander Vance," Caltharath said, her voice calm and steady, "I believe this is where we begin. If we are to build this alliance, we must start with trust." Vance met her gaze, his expression firm. "Trust is something we will have to earn, but I'm willing to try. I've seen what you're capable of, Warlord, but I also believe that what's ahead of us is far greater than what lies behind." The room was filled with quiet discussions as both sides exchanged ideas. Vance spoke of the resources Earth could offer, and Caltharath shared the knowledge and technology of the Tyrethians. Together, they laid the foundations for a new era of cooperation, one that could bring about a future of peace, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. As the meeting concluded, Vance and Caltharath stood side by side, looking out into the vast expanse of space. The stars above seemed endless, and the possibilities before them seemed just as infinite. For the first time in his life, Vance felt a sense of unity with the universe. They had faced destruction, war, and betrayal, but now they were forging a path that would lead to something greater than either side had ever known. "Whatever comes next," Vance said quietly, "we're in this together." Caltharath nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Together, Commander. Together, we will create a future that is worthy of both our peoples." And so, the first steps toward a new alliance were taken. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, there was hope. The war had ended, not through force, but through the willingness of two powerful leaders to choose peace.